Stan and I spent the afternoon at a pavilion in Peace Valley Park in Doylestown, up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. We were celebrating the 3rd birthday of our great niece, Juliana. Some of you might remember praying for Juliana when she was born prematurely, more than 2 months before her due date. And so from the size of a football, she has grown to an adorable, curious child. As we walked down the path from the parking lot, we were met by a toddler running full stream toward us in a jean jacket and a dinosaur print dress. Grateful I was not carrying anything, I crouched down and caught this fireball of unadulterated joy and energy in my arms. I couldn't help but realize I held a miracle. And although I have an extra 64 years on this child, Juliana has me beat in terms of hospital stays. Through every ordeal at Children's Hospital, I am amazed how she models resilience, the ability to withstand adversity and bounces back. And speaking of resilience, how about those widows, right? I did change the first reading because it's one most of us probably aren't that familiar with, another hidden gem hanging out in Genesis. So our readings highlight 2 stories of widows. Neither of them fit the stereotype of the silent, helpless, vulnerable widow. By their actions, and in their actions, what we see is perseverance and resilience. So let's take a look, maybe a closer look at what happened in these 2 stories. And there's no need to moralize. First, the reading that Diane proclaimed from Genesis introduces us to Tamar, who's married to the oldest of Judah, the patriarch's 3 sons. When dies, Judah arranges for his 2nd son to marry her and hopefully father a child. The 2nd son also dies. Now, this might sound strange to us unless we understand the Old Testament law that protects widows from poverty and cruel treatment, which is known as levirate marriage. It dictates that it's a younger brother's duty to provide an heir to continue the older brother's line. However, with his 2 eldest sons dead, Judah suggests that Tamar return to her father's house as a widow and wait to marry Shelah, his youngest son, once he comes of age. This was prompted by Judah's concern that his youngest son might also die. But when Judah ends up reneging on his promise, deception leads to conception. Tamar disguises herself as a veiled sex worker and positions herself on the road where she knows Judah will pass during sheep shearing time. And Judah agrees to pay her a goat in exchange for intercourse. Tamar agrees on condition that he give his seal, his staff, and his cord, identifying articles. She conceives and carries twins. When Judah hears that his daughter-in-law is pregnant, he threatens to have her burned alive for prostituting herself. So am I the only one who senses a gender-based double standard here?
Oh my God.
And in response, Tamar produces the items that Judah had given her to save face. He admits she was more in the right than he. So she is permitted to live. One of the twin baby boys, Perez, later becomes an ancestor of King David. I'd say Tamar creatively demonstrates the ability to withstand adversity and bounce back, ensuring her right to children from the line of Judah. And then our gospel introduces a nameless widow who harasses a narcissistic, unjust judge until he rules in her favor. The judge does the right thing for the wrong reason. His fear of a black eye takes precedence over the widow's well-being. The traditional interpretation of this parable is that if we persist and pray hard enough, we will get God's attention, as if we can persuade God to respond. That's not the message that I want to leave you with today. I'd rather shift the focus. Anyone here familiar with the Jesus Seminar? The Jesus Seminar was the result of 6 years of research by an international team of New Testament scholars focused on the question, what did Jesus really say? They inventoried ancient texts attributed to Jesus and then debated and color-coded more than 1,500 sayings of Jesus's. The coding scheme had 4 different categories: words that they agreed Jesus spoke, words Jesus probably spoke, words that reflect Jesus' idea, and words that they felt were totally inauthentic. The consensus of the fellows from the Jesus Seminar on today's gospel were that the opening sentence was an editorial comment. They concluded that the persistent widow was probably a story Jesus told, and they agreed that the final paragraph was not authentic. So, using a sandwich analogy, I'd invite you to discard the beginning and ending paragraphs like stale pieces of bread and focus on the meat. In this case, the interaction between a justice-seeking widow who pesters a corrupt judge, influencing him ultimately to grant her justice. And so rather than to compare God to the unjust judge and interpret the message that only if we persist in prayer, God rewards us, let's flip our perspective and see the divine one in the resilient widow. When we do that, we see the Holy One crying out through people whose experience might be different than ours. Perhaps poor, abused, alienated, homeless, addicted, immigrant. Can we begin to understand that God comes to us through the lives of others as they persistently seek justice? Stretch your minds with me. Are we able to see ourselves as the unjust judge? We all find ourselves in situations that challenge us. Some of us seem to be more resilient than others. I came across an article this week on resilient people that referenced a pattern of using their trauma to fuel positive impact. And I just want to briefly mention media executive and philanthropist who was sexually abused by male relatives and pregnant at the age of 14. She subsequently built a media empire and starred in the Oprah Winfrey Show. The second was Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in jail as a political prisoner for opposing apartheid. And after being released from prison, was elected South Africa's first Black president. So, my friends, whether the widow, Tamar, Oprah, Nelson Mandela, or Juliana Stories of resilience inspire us. God bless you all.